The place smelled like lemon polish and hot coffee. That sharp, clean scent hotels used to pretend nothing messy ever happens there. I stood at the edge of the reception area, jacket folded over my arm, watching her talk with the coordinator. Her laugh carried, bright, practiced, the kind she used in front of people who didn't know her. She glanced over, just once. Quick, measured. Then she waved me over. "Hey," she said, already turning back to the desk. "This is just a friend." She didn't say my name. The coordinator smiled politely, typed something, asked about seating. I felt the words land and spread in my chest like cold water. Just a friend. After 8 years. After shared leases, shared holidays, shared everything that doesn't show up on paperwork. I smiled. Not wide. Just enough. "Actually," I said, calm as I could manage, "just an X." There was a half-second pause. Not long enough for anyone else to notice. Long enough for me to see her jaw tighten. I set the jacket on the chair, nodded once, and walked out. The doors closed behind me with a soft, final thump. I sat in my car with the engine off, watching people move through the glass like fish in an aquarium. My phone buzzed in my hand. I didn't look at it. I kept replaying the way she said it. Casual. Efficient. Like she'd rehearsed. This wasn't new. That was the problem. For months, she'd been editing me out in small ways. Introducing me late. Talking over me. Referring to plans as hers instead of ours. Nothing you could point to without sounding paranoid. So I'd stayed quiet. I told myself it was stress. The job. The upcoming event. The way she'd been snapping at waiters and apologizing later, like she didn't recognize herself either. But standing there at that desk, hearing myself reduced to a placeholder, something finally clicked into place. I didn't drive away right away. I watched the lobby. I watched her lean in close to a guy in a navy suit I didn't recognize. Watched her touch his arm when she laughed. Watched him say something that made her tilt her head the way she used to when she was listening to me. My phone buzzed again. Then again. I finally looked. One text. From her. "Where did you go?" I didn't answer. I checked the time instead. 4 minutes hadn't passed yet. I didn't know it then, but those 4 minutes were about to turn the room inside out. I drove around the block twice before I parked. Same hotel, different entrance. Valet side. Quieter. No glass walls. No audience. The lobby clock said 6:12. 4 minutes hadn't passed yet. I sat there with my hands on the steering wheel, listening to the faint thud of music bleeding through the building. Some instrumental playlist meant to feel expensive and forgettable at the same time. My phone kept lighting up on the passenger seat. "Can you come back? We need to talk. This isn't what you think." That last one almost made me laugh. I didn't reply. I turned the phone face down and went inside. From this angle, the reception area looked different. Smaller. More crowded. The illusion of control was already cracking. I leaned against a column, half hidden behind a potted plant that had probably cost more than my first car. I wasn't spying. I wasn't lurking. I was observing. She was at the desk again, shoulders tense now, one hand gripping the edge like it might slide away. The coordinator's smile was gone. Her eyebrows were drawn together as she scrolled through something on the screen. The guy in the navy suit stood a step too close. I recognized that posture instantly. Protective, but not committed. The kind men adopt when they think they're being tested. A woman in a green dress approached the desk, phone already in her hand. She looked confused, then annoyed. Another followed. Then a man in a gray blazer. The coordinator said something I couldn't hear. Whatever it was, it landed hard. The woman in green shook her head. "No," she said clearly. "That's not what I was told." The guy in the navy suit glanced around, suddenly aware of the growing circle. He took half a step back from her. I checked the time again. 6:16. This was the pattern I'd been ignoring. She liked to manage narratives. Keep people in separate lanes. Tell slightly different versions of the same story depending on who was listening. Not lies exactly. Just edits. I'd been one of the edits for a while. I remembered a dinner 3 months earlier. A coworker of hers had asked how we met. She'd answered before I could. "Oh, we go way back," she said. Vague. Convenient. I'd smiled then too. The coordinator raised her voice just enough for it to carry. "I need clarity," she said. "Because the seating chart you approved doesn't match the relationship information you provided." That got attention. People shifted. Leaned in. Pretended not to. The woman in green crossed her arms. "You said he wasn't coming." Her head snapped toward the sound. Her eyes scanned the crowd. They landed on me. For a split second, everything stopped. The music, the movement, even the low hum of conversation felt like it dropped out. She didn't look angry. She looked afraid. I didn't wave, didn't react, just met her eyes and stayed still. Someone else spoke, then someone else. Questions overlapping, names being repeated, explanations trying to form and failing halfway out. The guy in the Navy suit cleared his throat. I think there's been a misunderstanding. No, the coordinator said. Calm, firm. There has been a misrepresentation. That word rippled. I felt it then. Not triumph. Not satisfaction. Relief. Because I finally knew I wasn't imagining things. My phone buzzed again. A call this time. I let it ring. When it stopped, the lobby was no longer pretending to be polite, and everyone was staring at her. She broke first. Not crying. Not yelling. Just movement. Sharp, panicked. She stepped away from the desk and started weaving through people toward me, heels clicking too fast for the floor. Someone reached out like they wanted to stop her, then thought better of it. I didn't move. Up close, I could see the cracks she'd been smoothing over for months. The tight smile that wouldn't quite form. The way her eyes kept darting past me, checking who was watching. Why are you here? She asked under her breath. I tilted my head. You said I was just a friend. Friends can stop by? Her mouth opened, closed. She swallowed. This isn't the time, she said. You embarrassed me. That almost did it. Almost pulled a reaction out of me. But I stayed where I was, hands loose at my sides, voice level. You introduced me, I said. I just corrected it. She glanced back toward the desk. The circle had grown. People weren't even pretending anymore. Phones were out. Whispered conversations were stacking up like dominoes. The guy in the Navy suit had disappeared. That didn't go unnoticed. Can we talk somewhere private? She asked. I looked past her, at the coordinator, who was now quietly reprinting something, at the woman in green, who was shaking her head while typing furiously on her phone, at a couple near the elevators who looked like they'd just been handed a puzzle with missing pieces. This is the most honest room we've had in a while, I said. Why change now? Her face flushed. You don't understand. I nodded slowly. That's been the theme. She grabbed my arm. Not hard, just enough to signal ownership. Habit. I gently stepped out of it. That's when her composure finally slipped. You left, she hissed. You made it worse. I left, I said, because you were already gone. She stared at me like she was trying to decide whether to argue or beg. Behind her, the coordinator cleared her throat again. I need confirmation, the coordinator said, addressing her directly now. Is he your former partner or current? Silence. Every second stretched. Her shoulders sagged, just slightly. Until I knew well. Former, she said. The word landed heavy. Someone behind us let out a short, incredulous laugh. Another voice said, Wait, what? The woman in green stepped forward. Then why is his name still attached to? Enough, she snapped, spinning around. Too fast. Too sharp. That's when it fully turned. The questions stopped being polite. People compared notes. Timelines overlapped. Details didn't match. I didn't have to say anything. They did the work for me. I felt oddly calm, like I'd stepped out of a storm and was watching it hit shore from a distance. She turned back to me one last time, eyes glossy now. Please, she said quietly. Not like this. I checked the time. 6:20, for minutes had passed a while ago. This, I said, is exactly how it had to be. I walked past her, toward the exit, while the room filled with voices that weren't mine. Behind me, something shattered. Not glass. Something more fragile. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel the urge to look back. I didn't make it to the doors. Hey, wait. A man's voice this time. Older. Steadier. I turned and saw her uncle. Gray hair, loosened tie. The kind of guy who always volunteers to handle logistics because he trusts systems more than people. He held up a hand. Not accusing. Not friendly either. Can we talk? He asked. I glanced back. She was still standing where I'd left her, frozen in the middle of the room like the floor had shifted without warning. The coordinator was on the phone now. Two people were arguing in low voices near the desk. Someone laughed again, too loud, too sharp. I'm done talking, I said. He nodded. That's fair. But before you go, I think you should hear this. He leaned in just enough that others wouldn't hear. She told us you weren't coming because you'd moved on, that you didn't want to be involved. Said it was mutual. I exhaled through my nose. Slow. Did she? I said. She also said, he continued, eyes steady. that anything still in your name was a formality. Temporary. That word again. Convenient. Flexible. I felt something settle in my chest. Not anger. Confirmation. Thanks for telling me, I said. He hesitated. For what it's worth, I don't think she expected you to stand up for yourself. I didn't stand up, I said. I corrected a label. Outside, the air was cooler. The noise dropped away like someone had shut off a faucet. I leaned against my car and finally checked my phone. 9 missed calls. A string of messages stacking on top of each other. Please come back. You're misunderstanding everything. This is getting out of control. Answer me. Then one that came in just now. They're asking questions I can't answer. That one made me smile. Just a little. I typed, then erased. Typed again. Finally, I sent one sentence. You shouldn't have answered for me in the first place. I put the phone away. I drove home without music. Without rushing. Every red light felt earned. The apartment was quiet. Too quiet. Her shoes were still by the door. Her coat still on the chair. The smell of her shampoo lingered in the hallway like a memory that hadn't realized it was obsolete yet. I sat at the kitchen table and opened my laptop. Not to dig. Not to snoop. To look at things I'd been avoiding. Shared calendars. Old emails. Documents she'd said she'd handle later. Small inconsistencies that had felt rude to question at the time. Patterns emerged fast when I wasn't protecting them anymore. Timelines didn't line up. Names repeated. Explanations overlapped just enough to hide gaps. By the time my phone buzzed again, my hands were steady. Her name lit up the screen. I let it ring. Then it stopped. A minute later, a text came through. I never meant for it to come out like that. I stared at the words for a long time. Not I lied. Not I'm sorry. Just like that. I closed the laptop. The decision wasn't dramatic. It didn't feel cinematic. It felt inevitable. And that was worse for her than anything I could have said in that lobby. She showed up just after 9. No warning. No call. Just the soft click of the lock and the sound of her heels stopping short when she realized the lights were off except for the kitchen. I was sitting at the table, the same place I'd been for an hour, a glass of water untouched in front of me. She didn't take her coat off. That told me everything. You didn't answer, she said. I didn't need to. She hovered near the counter, arms folded tight, like she was holding herself together by force. Her makeup was still perfect, but her eyes were red, not crying, not yet. Something closer to shock. They're blowing this out of proportion, she said. People love drama. You didn't, I replied. She flinched. Barely, but I saw it. You left me standing there, she said. Do you know what that did? I looked at her for a long second. Really looked. I know what it revealed. Silence stretched between us. The refrigerator hummed. A car passed outside. She finally sat down across from me. Careful, like the chair might break. I didn't think you'd come, she said quietly. There it was. Not an apology. Not confusion. An assumption. You told people I wasn't, I said. She rubbed her temples. I told them what made sense. For who? She didn't answer. I stood up and walked past her, opened the hallway drawer, and pulled out the folder I'd put together earlier. Nothing dramatic. Just printed pages. Clean. Organized. I set it on the table between us. She stared at it like it might explode. What's this? She asked. Things you said were temporary. Her breath hitched. You went through my stuff? I went through ours. She opened the folder slowly. The color drained from her face one page at a time. Dates. Names. Notes she'd forgotten to delete. Calendar entries labeled vaguely enough to sound harmless unless you knew how often they happened. She stopped halfway through. You don't understand the context, she said. I sat back down. Explain it. She tried. She really did. Words came out fast. Overlapping. Justifications stacked on top of each other until none of them could support their own weight. Every explanation required me to ignore something I now couldn't. When she finally ran out of steam, she looked at me like she was waiting for a verdict. I didn't give one. I'm done, I said. Her eyes widened. Done what? Covering for you. Filling in gaps. Standing quietly while you decide how visible I'm allowed to be. She shook her head. You're overreacting. That one hurt more than the rest. I picked up the folder, closed it, and slid it back toward myself. No, I said. I'm finally reacting the right amount. She stood abruptly. So what? You're just walking away. I thought about the lobby. The desk. The word friend. I already did, I said. She opened her mouth to argue again, then stopped. Because for the first time, she realized I wasn't trying to win. I was leaving. and that terrified her more than any scene ever could. She didn't cry right away. She paced back and forth between the counter and the window, like movement alone could reset the moment. Her heels were off now, bare feet on tile. Quiet, careful, like the apartment might be listening. "You can't just decide this," she said. "We should talk to someone. Take a beat." "I took months," I replied. She stopped pacing, turned toward me slowly. "You never said you were unhappy." I nodded. "You never asked." That landed harder than I expected. Her shoulders slumped a little, like something finally slipped out of alignment. "I was under pressure," she said. "Everything was happening at once. Everything except honesty." She sat back down, this time without ceremony. Elbows on the table, hands covering her mouth. "Is this about him?" she asked. Interesting phrasing. I didn't answer immediately. I watched her eyes while the silence did its work. "Because if this is about him," she continued quickly, "you're making it bigger than it was." "There it is," I said. She froze. "What? You're still negotiating the size of it?" Her eyes filled then. Not theatrically, just a slow, involuntary shine. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she said. I believed that. And somehow, that made it worse. "I know," I said. "You meant to manage me." She shook her head, tears finally slipping free. "I didn't think it would end like this." I stood up. "It didn't end," I said. "It exposed." I slept on the couch that night. Not out of spite. Out of clarity. Sometime around 3, I woke to the sound of drawers opening. Soft. Controlled. She was packing selectively. Not leaving, just reclaiming space. Proof she still existed here. In the morning, she was gone. No note. No goodbye. Just empty hangers and a silence that felt cleaner than the one before. I made coffee. Opened the windows. Let the apartment breathe. Then I did the one thing I'd been avoiding because it felt too final. I started separating things. Accounts. Access. Names on documents. Not aggressively. Methodically. By noon, my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. "Hi," a woman said. Professional. Calm. "I'm calling regarding a change request submitted last night. We just need confirmation." I smiled to myself. "Yes," I said. "That request stands." When I hung up, I didn't feel victorious. I felt lighter. And somewhere across town, I knew she was realizing that the disbelief in that lobby hadn't been about embarrassment. It had been about consequences. The messages started that afternoon. Not from her. From people I barely knew. "Hey, I don't want to get involved, but just checking in. Are you okay?" That's when I understood how far it had spread. Not gossip, clarification. People comparing what they'd been told with what they'd seen. Filling in blanks she'd left scattered everywhere. She finally texted around 5. "We need to talk. This got out of hand." I read it twice. Then I put the phone down and went for a walk. The city felt louder than usual. Construction noise. Car horns. Someone arguing on the sidewalk about nothing that mattered. Life continuing without consulting me. That helped. By the time I got back, there were more messages. From her sister. From a mutual friend. From someone who worked with her and clearly didn't know which version of the story to believe anymore. I answered none of them. Instead, I did something small. Intentional. I changed my status. Not on social media. On the shared event portal we'd both been listed on. One click. Removed. Guest. No explanation. No announcement. Just absence. She showed up again that night. Different energy this time. Quieter. Careful. Like she was approaching a wild animal she wasn't sure remembered her. "I didn't think you'd start cutting ties like this," she said. "I didn't think you'd start pretending I didn't exist," I replied. She winced. Sat down slowly. "They're asking me questions," she said. "About timelines. About why you were still listed on things if I was just a friend." I finished. She nodded. I leaned back in my chair. "You should tell them the truth." She laughed weakly. "You know it's not that simple." "It is," I said. "It's just uncomfortable." Silence again. Then she asked the question I'd been waiting for. "So what happens now?" I considered it. "Now," I said, "I stop making myself smaller so you can keep your story straight." She stared at me, searching for something. Anger. Bargaining. A crack she could slip through. There wasn't one. I stood and opened the door. She hesitated. "Is this it?" I met her eyes. "This," I said, "is me finally matching your clarity." She left without another word. Later that night, I sat alone with the lights off, city glow bleeding in through the windows. I thought about that reception desk. The polished surface. The word she chose. Friend. It wasn't an insult. It was a decision. And 4 minutes later, so was mine. I didn't know yet what the long-term aftermath would look like. Who would take whose side? What stories would survive? But for the first time, I wasn't afraid of being misunderstood. Because the people who mattered had already seen enough. A week passed before the noise finally died down. Not because people stopped talking, but because there was nothing left to clarify. Once the versions ran out, all that remained were facts. And facts don't argue. She didn't come back. She sent one last message instead. Long, careful, edited within an inch of its life. She apologized for how things looked. For the timing. For the misunderstanding. She never apologized for the introduction. I didn't respond. The quiet that followed wasn't empty. It was unfamiliar. Mornings felt slower. Evenings longer. I noticed things I hadn't before. How much space I took up when I wasn't shrinking myself to fit someone else's narrative. I ran into someone from the reception a few days later. A woman I barely knew. She hesitated, then smiled at me. I'm glad you left when you did, she said. It made a lot of things make sense. That stayed with me. Not the disbelief. Not the whispers. The sense. I used to think dignity was something you defended loudly. Drew lines around. Explained until people understood. Turns out, sometimes dignity is just correcting a word and walking away. She chose friend because it was convenient. I chose ex because it was true. And 4 minutes later, everyone finally understood the difference.